It's my pleasure to introduce you to our guest speaker, Julie Begbie. Julie Begbie is a business psychologist with 25 years of experience and the founder of Happy Workplace, a company that's at the forefront of promoting positivity and satisfaction in work environments. Julie and I have worked together for a number of years with businesses, helping them to improve their people processes and practices to make the workplace an even better place to work. Julie's goal for today's session is to share insights and takeaways you can implement in your own workplaces. So over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Pam. What a lovely introduction. Yeah, absolutely. So my goal today is for this to be a worthwhile investment of your time. So as I'm talking through over the next kind of 30 minutes or so, if you hear something that you think, oh, actually, that might be quite useful within my workplace, take a note of it, because at the end, we're going to challenge you to find one thing that you're going to do differently as a result of attending this. So as Pam said, my name is Julie Begbie, and this is a webinar on well-being at work. So what we're going to cover off is, what is a well-being culture? Like what does that actually mean? Why do you need one? Because you do. And give you some practical steps to look at, no matter what size of business or type of business that you're working within, practical steps that you can take and use within your workplace to create a well-being culture. Why should you do it? There's a few really interesting stats, actually. The first one is, for every £1 spent on mental health interventions to take a specific form of well-being, employers get £5 back. So for every £1 spent on mental health, positive mental health intervention, employers get £5 back. So not only is this the right thing to do, but it makes business sense. I mean, look at the kind of the challenges that are going on in society just now. The current stats are 1 in 4 people are likely to experience some sort of mental health problem. So if it's 1 in 4, you can be sure that somebody in your team is going to fall into that, if not more than one person. Poor mental health costs Scottish employers over £2 billion every year. That's a Scottish government survey. £2 billion looking at the impact of poor mental health on workplaces. And when we think about it, people spend an average of between 90,000 and 100,000 hours at work over their lifetime. So there's a duty of care here to make sure that we are creating workplaces that support people's health and well-being, because that's a long, long time to be spending at work somewhere where you don't feel supported. And of course, the difference, like the kind of transition between work and outside work, is getting more blurred all the time. So if you're making sure that people's health and well-being is looked after for the majority of their day, that is going to ripple out into the rest of their life, into their evenings, into their weekends, into their life. And I genuinely believe, and I'll come back to this at the end, but I genuinely believe that showing people how to look after their health and well-being is not only has a huge impact on that one person, but it's also influential to the people around them. So, they say you're the average of the 5 people that you spend most time with. If you are able to help your team to really focus on their own health and well-being and demonstrate that, then that is going to be seen and picked up by their family, friendship circles, your team, your work, and ultimately the world. We're going to change the world together, right? So the goals for this session. So we're going to define a wellbeing culture. What does it actually look like? And then I'm going to tell you what I think are the 7 blocks of wellbeing at work. There is a huge amount of research on health and wellbeing and what employers can do to facilitate a health and wellbeing culture. I don't want to overload you. We've only got an hour. It's not even going to take an hour. I want to give you 7 examples of things that you could think about introducing if you haven't already got them within your culture, off the back of attending this webinar. Yeah, So implement straight after the session. Okay, so why focus on well-being? People aren't choosing jobs on salary anymore. Of course, salary is always going to be important, but back in my day, I'm old, right? Back in my day, you would look at the jobs in the newspaper and you would be really taken by the band or the grade or the salary or the status or the title. And it would be, and you would just take what you were given and you would come into a workplace and you would just accept that that workplace was how it was. That was just what you did. You know, you didn't have a choice. We just weren't in a position to be able to go, oh, I don't like the way that you know, this particular organization is run. Like, we didn't know any different. That's all changed, you know, particularly. So it's changed for everybody, but particularly the younger generation, the young workforce now coming in for their first jobs, their second jobs. They're looking for an employer that cares. And that is becoming far more important, and rightly so. Like, rightly so, that is becoming far more important than you being able to have this amazing salary offering and reward package that's more kind of tangible. It's people want to go to work and come home and feel good about their work. They want to feel good about the interactions that they've had in work. They don't want to feel ill on a Sunday night. When I started work back in the day, everybody felt ill on a Sunday night. They're like, oh, I'm really dreading Monday. That was just, not everybody, but the majority of people, that was pretty common. Now people are choosing to opt out of that. And it's your job as a leader to make sure that you're creating an environment where people maybe aren't skipping into work on a Monday morning, if indeed you have a Monday to Friday setup, but however it is. But one where people aren't dreading it, they don't hate their job, they don't kind of bring everybody else down as well. Because if you have ever worked somewhere where you just really didn't like it, your energy is rubbish and your energy is infectious. And then that very, very quickly creates a negative culture where people are talking about how terrible the place is. And it's very, even if you're upbeat, right? I am a total Pollyanna. Like, I can see the best in everything. However, if I'm in a group of people that are all like really low energy, really kind of just happy talking about how terrible things are, it's really difficult to manage your own energy in that. So it's your job as a leader to make sure that we embed practices here that are going to promote positivity. They're going to promote mental, emotional, and physical health of all your employees. You want people to feel valued and supported. Wellbeing directly impacts productivity. So not only is it the right thing to do, it's also going to make your business more successful. It obviously impacts retention, and recruitment. So then how costly and how time consuming it is to deal with staff turnover. Imagine you had an organization where no one wanted to leave unless it was for a right reason. We don't want to be keeping people trapped, but where people really thrived and weren't keeping one eye on what your competitors are doing because they feel cared for. People who feel cared for are engaged, they're motivated. It's like kind of nurturing the roots of a tree to make sure that you're kind of enjoying the fruits of success, to put kind of a cheesy slant to it. It's about just creating that environment that you would love to work in yourself, that you would love your family to work in. As Pam said at the beginning, Pam and I have been working together for a very long time, and we've been so lucky to work with so many businesses in Scotland. And at the end of it, I always think to myself, after I've kind of finished working with a business, I always think to myself, is this a business I would want my kids to work in? And there's definitely have been a lot that I would want my kids to work in, and I'm your biggest. If you convince me of that, I am your biggest advocate. So because of the age, my kids are 19 and 21, so they're in that kind of first job, starting out the career, moving through uni, that system. But because of that, I know loads of other people that have kids the same age, because that's when I met all my friends when they were babies. So lots and lots of young people I know are now looking for that kind of first step in the career ladder, that first job. And I am the person who's going around going, oh, you should apply. If this company have a vacancy, you should go there. I think that's an amazing place to work. Like Pam and I have been really lucky to get a really good insight. And what I've done, where I've come up with these 7 different suggestions I'm going to give you, is these are examples from companies we've worked with where it's just working brilliantly. And when we want, the one question that we always ask everybody that we speak to in a company is, do you feel valued and appreciated for what you do? And when people say yes, Pam and I go, what makes you say that? And then we take it down and then we pass it on to you, because that's the stuff that makes the difference. So everything I'm going to tell you here today has come from our real life experience of working with companies in Scotland like yours. I've probably worked with some of you already. So you might even recognize, if you're on here and you recognize a practice that maybe Pam and I have picked up from you, please let us know at the end, because yeah, and thank you for kind of letting us in and sharing. Wellbeing, culture and action. So wellbeing starts with the leadership team. 80% of team behavior is influenced by the manager. 80% of team behavior is influenced by the behavior of the manager. So given we've already said we spend 90,000 hours at work in your lifetime, you have a huge part to play in the health and well-being of the world. Remember, I'm getting you to think big, but it starts by prioritizing your own well-being. You need to make sure that you're looking after yourself first. It's that kind of, you can't pour from an empty cup or an empty jug or whatever that expression is. We know that mental health stigma, so to take mental health as one aspect of health and wellbeing, we know that mental health stigma continues to be a huge barrier in Scotland. There's a really interesting study that was just done at the end of last year, the Scottish Mental Illness Stigma Study. 7 in 10 people with experience of severe and enduring mental illness have been treated unfairly in Scotland by employers, supervisors, and managers. It's understandable and it's okay not to fully understand someone's situation and experience, but it's never okay to stigmatize or discriminate as a result. So what I would like you to think about today is, what are the proactive measures that you're taking within your organization to make sure that you're looking out for the health and well-being of your staff? Health and well-being is something that everybody needs. It can be seen as something that's reactionary. So you might have policies like, so you might have a counselling scheme available maybe for somebody that, has flagged up that would benefit them. And all those things are great. And we'll come on to those a little bit later. But actually, everyone's got mental health. It's a state that we all need. And if you think about this sort of football team analogy or professional sports team analogy, you don't wait until you're injured before you seek that kind of coaching and support. It's about that preventative measure. It's about creating the environment where people thrive without, and also addressing when people actually need the help at kind of point of crisis. But it's about more than that, and it's about everybody, including you. I found 3 notable wellbeing cultures I want to tell you about. These are all huge companies, and I'm going to tell you what they do for inspiration, but then I'm going to break it down into what a smaller company, because it's likely that the company that you work for probably isn't as big as these, although it might be. Buffer. Let's talk about Buffer. So Buffer is a social media posting piece of software. I don't know if you've got a small business, you've probably used it. I've used it for years. Buffer is run by a guy called Joel Gascoigne, and Joel Gascoigne has suffered from a number of mental health challenges and talks about it freely. And that is what makes the difference at Buffer. So it's the leader being vulnerable and not trying to kind of, pretend that everything's okay. He talks about the times that he's spoken to a therapist. He talks about feeling overwhelmed. He talks about how he wants employees not to hide their emotions. He believes in authenticity, and he wants people to really be themselves at work, share the highs and share the lows and look for that support, and just really make it, really encourage people to just be who they are. And then he provides like support to kind of online therapists and free subscriptions to, there's a health and wellbeing app called Joyable that you get for free if you work for Buffer. They use online resources like Slack channels to share and discuss mental health issues. Interestingly, they really focus on the preventative measures that I was just talking about. In Buffer, they have an unsick day, which is a day off that must be dedicated to preventative care. So I liked that. So it's like, I guess it's taken the concept of a duvet day and just making it more, because you're saying you can have this unsick day once a year. It's just, it shows the culture. It's brilliant to use in recruitment. Because if you look at a company and they say, we have an unsick day, I've not heard of any other company doing this. So if you're looking for one thing and you like the idea of this, you should do this, right? But an unsick day, you might not want to call it an unsick day, but an unsick day where you can take it at any point, but you have to say, what is the preventative well-being thing you're going to do? So you might go to a spa, you might go for a run, you might like whatever. You might be a duvet day for you, but it's getting people to think of that and being really clear as a culture that we support this. This is okay. We can have these conversations. Pinterest in the middle. So again, you've probably heard of Pinterest, social media platform. I'm more of a kind of almost a search engine, actually. So Pinterest has an internal community called Pinside Out, and this is all about well-being focused events. There's also a forum in there for employees to discuss mental health issues. They bring in health professionals, they bring in experts, external speakers, and they talk about topics like, so things like surviving Christmas with your family. Like, they talk about feminism. They talk about like not just your typical well-being, how to, self-care and meditation, mindfulness, and all of the things that you might envisage when you think about health and well-being. They widen it out. They look for what is it that their team wants to talk about. And they make sure, and they also then get people to present to each other. So say somebody is like a yoga instructor outside of work, then they're brought in and encouraged in work time to share their skills with other people. So Pinside Out is very much their forum, and again, they lead with it in their recruitment advertising. If you want to support for your health and well-being, this is very clearly how we brand it and how we do it. The last one that I found that's notable health and wellbeing culture is Butternut Box. Now, Butternut Box is real food for dogs, and it's become very, very popular over the last 3 or 4 years. It's people spend a lot of money on their dogs, don't they? Their values fit into the acronym DOGS, of course. So it's dedicated and determined, open and honest, genuine care, and that's where their health and wellbeing bit comes in, and strive for better. Now, as you would imagine, a lot of their health and wellbeing revolves around therapy dogs, having a dog-friendly office, free butternut boxes for staff dogs, but also they have your flexible working, your counselling, your yearly wellness budget, cycle to work scheme, etc. And we'll come on to those in a minute. So how do you create a wellbeing culture wherever you are starting from? Number one, so as I said, I'm going to tell you 7 ways to do it. The first one is regular wellness check-ins. Pam and I have seen these work brilliantly in organisations, even before I tell you what it is. And you can do it in any way you want. If you we have regular wellness check-ins in your recruitment, in your staff handbook, if you tell people that during induction, it just tells you everything you need to know about this organisation. Do you know, it just gives you that. If I come home from an organisation and I say, oh, I've got my regular wellness check-in tomorrow, someone who works in an organisation where that is not in place is going to be intrigued. They're going to go, oh, wow, that tells me a lot about your employer, that you're prepared to invest time in this. Now, you probably have some sort of check-in system already, some sort of, you might still call it appraisals, you might call it check-in, you might have informal conversations, but some sort of performance management. These can be incorporated within your current check-in system, or they can be done separately. Basically, it needs to be not a paper-driven exercise, but a short, informal conversation that just provides that platform for employees to voice their concerns around, specifically around their kind of mental and emotional health. Even when we create a culture where we say there's an open door policy, people so we tell people, yeah, you're free to talk about mental health, come to me if you've got any challenges. Some people will have the confidence and the assertiveness to talk about that, but other people won't, even though you have created that culture. So you'll get people that are more private and just won't have the confidence to do it. So the key here is to just allocate that time to sit down with everybody just for minutes. Like, these don't need to be long formal things, to just specifically discuss their well-being. What you'll find is when you start these, if you haven't done them before, if you haven't asked these type of questions before in your check-ins, at the beginning, when you say, we're focusing, we're going to put an enhanced focus on health and well-being, when you sort of, because it starts with that announcement, doesn't it? It starts by telling your current teams. At the beginning, people tend to be closed, skeptical, unsure as to kind of what this might mean. But it's about that consistency. It's about, so even if someone doesn't really have anything to say the first time, it's about continuing doing it. It's about not going, oh, well, I asked everybody said it's fine. Is it? Or did they not feel comfortable to tell you? Certainly when I started out in the workplace, it would have been very weak to have had, it would have gone on your HR file if you had any sort of depression or, any stress or anxiety. That would have been very, very taboo, and people wouldn't have wanted to share it. I mean, that was 30 years ago. Like, happily, we don't live in that sort of society now. So it's about making sure, particularly if you've got an organization that's been around for a long time, it's about making sure that you've kind of changed and moved on with society. As well as one-on-ones and check-ins, you can also use anonymous surveys, so you can ask people about stressors. You can, from the back of the surveys and the check-ins, the information that you get, you can develop wellness action plans. So helping people to go, okay, what are your personal triggers? What are the potential stressors for you in the workplace? And then, what are the support strategies? What are your preferred support strategies? So it's not about saying you can go, oh, I feel uncomfortable speaking at meetings, so I'm not going to do it. Like, it's not that. If it's required for the job, it's required for the job. But it's about going, okay, but I'll acknowledge that actually that might bring on some anxiety. So parts of your role might make you feel anxious. So we've talked this through, my manager and I, and we've worked out, okay, here are some potential strategies that I could practice to be able to make that more comfortable. So it's not about covering it up, pretending it's okay. It's about going, okay, this is a part of the job that I feel is harder, and looking at that kind of personalized wellness action plan. So people are taking responsibility for it themselves, but you're helping it as the leader, as the manager, as the supervisor. Regular health and wellness updates as well, like sharing regular updates on new wellness resources that you've introduced. And I'm going to give you some resources a little bit later on today. So you can share through kind of emails, newsletters. There can be a section on your intranet. You can talk about it in meetings. It's just about bringing these things to life, and not, if you haven't got any sort of health and well-being policies or practices in place at the moment, like, that's completely fine. But it's about it not being a one and done. It's about not coming off this and going, okay, well, let's talk about this a lot for the next month, and then then once we've got it all in place, we just go, there it is, and we'll kind of move on. People are busy, organizations are busy, that's completely understandable, but it's about that kind of continuous and that consistency. Pam and I worked with a really lovely small company in Edinburgh that added, so in their check-ins, they added a personal goals question. So it wasn't necessarily specifically about well-being, but they would say, okay, so here are, like a normal check-in would be, these are the goals for the company. Let's distill them down and work out together. Well, what's your contribution going to be to that? So you're going to have maybe 2 or 3 goals that are going to be, you're going to be assessed on individually, and you're going to contribute that to the team, and then we'll all together be contributing that to the whole organization, and where we're trying to drive as a collective. But within these goals, this company that we work for always added in a personal goal. And particularly for the younger people in this business, and it was they employed a lot of young people. There were things like, I'd quite like to have passed my driving test by the end of the year, or, I want to start a savings account for a house deposit, or just other things that were really important to them in their lives. And it was just the very nature of asking them, this is what's important to the company, and let's work out how you're going to contribute to that. But it was the nature of going, but what's actually important to you? Because the whole great thing about these check-ins is, we're keeping people accountable. People will tend to do what gets rewarded. People will tend to do what gets asked about. So if they've got a personal goal and that's included, it just feels very holistic. And that it's just a simple thing. But when Pam and I spoke to the people that worked within this company, we would tend to speak to like a good cross section of the staff. Pretty much everybody told us what their personal goal was and how much of a family it felt. They felt like their manager was a family member who cared, because why does somebody saving for their first house deposit mean anything to a company? It doesn't really. It probably does, but it doesn't really. So taking that time to just have that, to just care, to find out about someone, to really understand them. And people don't leave workplaces where they feel that people care. There is a program called See Me at Work. So the website is, Pam's going to send out a health and wellbeing kind of summary guide after this. But if you wanted to look it up like directly after this, seemescotland.org, SEEME, has a really lovely resource for employers. And it's looking at, if you want to take a whole organizational approach, if you haven't got your kind of health and well-being in place, if you haven't got policies and procedures, if you haven't, got any check-ins, if you've never really thought about this before, you can sign into their digital portal, and it starts off with a full kind of self-assessment of your organization. It shows you how to get the views of your team, your employees, and how to create an improvement plan and present it. So it's like a 4-stage program looking at kind of cultures, policies, and practices. It's heavily focused on mental health, but it applies much more widely to general wellness as well. So if you're not sure where to start and you want to take one thing away from this, seemescotland.org and click into workplaces, and you'll see their See Me at Work program. That's a really, really good starting point. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2 is flexible working arrangements. This is a hot topic. Pam and I were just having a conversation about this before we came on live. Employers ask us about this all the time, and we're going through this difficult transition of, okay, we had everybody working at home during the pandemic where they could. I absolutely appreciate that not all jobs could, and so your organization might never have had anybody working from home. But let's just talk about thinking about, for your particular setup and your organization, how can you be as flexible as possible? And there is no right answer to this. We get asked all the time, what should we do? Should people be in 2 days? Should people be, should we be telling people the days, and there is no right answer, and organizations are doing it differently. The steer I would give you on this flexible working arrangements is, look at the data from the pandemic. If you did have people working from home, if there were any roles in your organization where that was appropriate, look at, so just what did that tell you? Did you survey people? So not just what was productivity, but also how did people feel? I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think 5 days in the office again, where there would be a possibility of work from home or 5 days at home is the ideal solution. I think there's somewhere in between. But for your organization, it's just simply about going, okay, can I respect my employees' work-life balance by offering them some sort of flexibility? So this doesn't have to be working from home, of course. But sometimes now people are managing family responsibilities that they didn't have before the pandemic. So employers are like, oh, before the pandemic, everybody could come in 5 days a week, and now people are saying that they can't. Well, things could have changed. Things could have changed in their health, in their family responsibilities. Sometimes the commutes. A lot of employers were people during the pandemic that were remote, and they weren't so worried about location, but then all of a sudden someone's living in Inverness and their office, the headquarters is in Glasgow, and that all of that now doesn't become as easy. And then if you allow some people not to come in, then so it's quite a tangled web to unravel. But the absolute key thing is to communicate about it, and I'll come on to communication as one of the separate points. But you can look at flexi time. So it's about, all of this is about treating your team like adults. The more you treat your team like adults, the more they will behave like adults, and the more they will give for you. So where you allow employees or your team members to have kind of flexible start and end days, as long as they can complete the required hours, as long as they complete their required workloads, if they can accommodate personal commitments like school runs, medical appointments, etc., then you're gonna have, they're gonna be so much more loyal to you, because they're gonna feel like you've paid it forward. The law of reciprocity. When you pay it forward to your team members, they are much more likely to kind of pay it back to you, to feel that they owe you. Compressed hours, of course, another way to do it. So working kind of longer hours on certain days in exchange for shorter hours or a day off through the week. Again, if you're managing personal responsibility or you just want a longer weekend, try these things and look at the data. Like, you don't have to, you can, all of these things can be positioned as a trial. Like, you don't have to kind of keep them. You don't, if it doesn't work out, if you find productivity goes down, then it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be something that you have forever. We've talked about remote working options, but allowing employees to create that work environment that suits their personal preferences and their productivity styles. Like, I'm self-employed, and I definitely don't work a 9 to 5. That really wouldn't suit me very much anymore. I work around the other commitments that I have in my day, and that really works well for me. In fact, that it would, if I thought I was going into a job where I was going to have to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, I'm not sure I would choose that now. Whereas at the beginning of my career, that's all there was in the field that I've been working in, which is learning development psychology. Obviously there's like job sharing as well, thinking about, can you get people to work together? So taking on the responsibilities of a full-time position, but allowing people to work part-time hours, fulfilling the roles needs, but kind of working it out together, again, trusting 2 or more people to share a job. And then there's obviously like time off in lieu as well. If overtime is necessary, make sure you allow employees to take that time back to balance out the extra hours. If you've got employees that are traveling, my husband's away in Leeds at the moment, he's just due back, and yeah, I think he's probably going to walk in at some point during this webinar, so I hope he doesn't come into the room. But he had to travel kind of at night, like out with his working hours, and his employer are very good at going, hey, you were on a train for 4 hours last night, let me make sure you take that back. And then he feels, when he's asked to do it, he feels like he's being cared for. He feels like it's not a kind of an additional ask. Trust your employees, and they'll repay that trust with anything to do with flexible working arrangements. If someone asks you if they can work flexibly, give it some thought. Now, you don't have to say yes, and it might not work. It has to fit with business needs, absolutely. But try and explore with them all the ways that it could work, because that's where you're going to build that kind of trust and loyalty. My son is working for one of the big banks in Edinburgh now, and when he was at university, he went during the pandemic. It was pretty much just as the pandemic was ending, and all his lectures were online, and he absolutely hated it. It was just, he couldn't do it because it was like, okay, sit and look at these PowerPoints for like, I know it's going to be a struggle for you to look at this for an hour. Imagine if I said, right, this is only hour 1 of 8. Like, you're going to have to sit all day and listen to me and look at these slides. Like, it's just, it doesn't work with most people's learning style. So when he was at uni and he was trying to kind of watch these PowerPoints and take in all the information, he really struggled. He lost motivation. He ended up deciding that uni wasn't for him. Now he's got an apprenticeship and he's working within a bank. So his degree was in IT, his apprenticeship is in IT. The bank that he's working for absolutely trust him to do the learning. So there's self-paced learning, but he is a completely different animal now because he's being trusted. Like, he can't quite believe that his manager's saying, okay, I can see you've got 15 hours of things to work through, you know, kind of self-paced study to work through. I'll let you do that over the next couple of days and then just let me know how you've got on. And he's just like, and he's really doing it, and he's setting his alarm and he's making sure that he's working, you know, his hours every day, and he's making sure he doesn't take any, and he's just a different person because he's trusted. Like, he's trusted to get on with it. Be careful just in terms of flexible working, like, you know, be careful again that you're role modeling this. Be careful, and if you are working flexibly, be really careful that if you say you decide that you're going to do some of your workload at night when the kids are in bed, or, you know, whatever the circumstance is, be careful that you're not that people don't feel that they need to respond to you. You know, if a manager emails you at 9 o'clock at night, be careful that people don't feel they need to respond. They always need to be on. So again, just when you're thinking about flexible working, be very, very clear in your communication. And, you know, and if you are, to answer the question that everyone asks us, I'd like people back in the office. There's definitely, or in the workplace, there's definitely a benefit to that in terms of collaboration and just for people's mental health and that sort of, like, I would love my son to be in the office more often than he is because he's starting his career and he's doing an awful lot of it from home. But the people aren't there for, you know, there was no point in him going in and sitting in the office on his own when the team aren't there. So, you know, things have changed, but there's reasons for people to be in and there's reasons for people not. And it's just simply about working through it and communicating it clearly with your team. Access to mental health resources. Now, if you have a big budget for health and wellbeing, then an employee assistance program is brilliant here. Putting people through mental health first aid training, looking at some sort of an online wellbeing mental health platform, you know, something that you can subscribe to that has a whole load of resources on it, offering wellness workshops and seminars, information signposting, like creating a hub, all of that is a really great thing to offer. However, I know some of you on here will have smaller companies that might not necessarily have a budget for all of this. One of the first Skills for Growth that I did with Pam, which is the project that we worked on for a long time, was with again a small company in Edinburgh who they had a lot of members, different company than the one I was just telling you about, and I was just so taken aback by how openly they were talking about their mental health. So they were telling us that whenever they went in for interview, they would talk about their mental health and what they needed, and, you know, how they managed their anxiety. Employer, and this employer responded absolutely positively to that vulnerability and honesty, and made sure that then they had in place the strategies that were needed to make these people feel supported. And it was just so lovely. And they would do things like, if a team member was feeling anxious, the manager would go out and meet them at the train station and kind of walk them up to work. It was just things that were just thoroughly decent things to do. And these were prioritized. So these were prioritized in the working day because health and well-being was it. It was, you know, it was the most important thing for this company. They also had a lovely relationship with a local mental health charity, and so they did fundraising for it, and I'll come on to kind of team building a little bit later on, but they did fundraising for this particular charity, and in return then the mental health charity came in and ran workshops for their team and helped share resources with their team. So it was a lovely free way of making sure they had a very kind of heavily supported mental health and health and wellbeing strategy. It was really lovely, and it was a huge attraction in recruitment, because young people who are feeling anxious or feel like they're looking for that support that they maybe had at school through health and wellbeing are looking for that in your recruitment ads. A second, so I've already told you about seemescotland.org. A second resource, I'm just going to look out over my other screen to make sure I get the end of it right, is healthyworkinglives.scot. Healthyworkinglives.scot. You might have heard of it. Healthy Working Lives was an award. It's been around for a long time, and it was, to encourage health and wellbeing within workplaces. It's evolved over the last few years. What it is now is a hub of training and resources to help you to create, so basically access to mental health resources, and it's funded by the Scottish Government, so there's no charge to you. So check out healthyworkinglives.scot. Encouraging physical health. This one is probably more obvious, but it's around making sure that you're not assuming that people are going to sit at their desks all day. Organise walk and talk meetings, set up company sports teams, where people are in the office, make sure you've got healthy snacks as opposed to a vending machine that's full of crisps and chocolate. Look at, can you do local deals with gyms or fitness classes so you can have some sort of subsidizing going on there? Look at having a kind of active meetings. So, can people have standing desks, cycle to work schemes, health challenges and competitions, like healthy eating options? I don't think I did this one with you actually, Pam, but I was working with an organisation through in the West, and they used to have, so they had kind of physical health challenges that people could choose, obviously opt into or not opt into, but they had like step count competitions. They had, how many flights of stairs that you can do in a day. They had bike to work days, etc. They used the gamification on fitness wearables. But what they used to do, which I just thought it was amazing, is you would walk into like an open plan office and pretty much everyone in the room would be up hula hooping. And they used to do hula hooping at 11 and 3, I think it was, those specific times. And everybody in the office would just get up and do kind of 5 minutes of hula hooping and sit back down again. And it just brought so much energy. And you know what, like that 3 o'clock slump is like in the afternoon as well. You've got another couple of hours to work and there's probably a lot going on. And it was just lovely. It was just a really, again, because it was highly encouraged by the employer, people felt like they were being cared for and therefore they cared for themselves. Team bonding activities. I worked for a really large organisation in Edinburgh that did a staff survey, and I remember I just started, I was only there about 6 months, and they did this staff survey that was run by Gallup, and it was all about your strengths, looking at where your strengths sit within the organisation. And therefore, from an organizational point of view, it was looking at, okay, if we're clear on where our strengths sit, how do we match those then to the job that we're in? Are we in the right job? Is it, should you maybe be looking at a kind of a jump in career? But it's about playing to people's strengths and not, not going, oh, Julie, you're good at this, but your reporting skills, your attention to detail isn't great, so we need to keep working on that. Well, I'm never going to be great at that, but I have strengths, I have talents, and I can be good at those. So it's about really kind of doubling down. And I learned that very clearly when I was working for this organisation, doubling down on your talents and your strengths. But one of the questions in this Gallup survey that the whole organisation did was, do you have a best friend at work? And if you've ever done this Gallup survey, StrengthsFinder survey, you might be familiar with that question. It caused a whole load of conversation in my team, in my department, and throughout the whole organisation, because people were like, I'm an adult. Like, people, either they were like, I'm an adult, I don't have a best friend, was the best friend, or I do have a best friend, but they're not at work. Like, so anyway, Gallup, I remember our HR team questioned this question with Gallup, and they said, you have to leave the word in as it is. This is the most predictive, because obviously they do, it's a psychometric tests are have to be valid and tested, and to make sure that they're predictive. So this question is the one question that indicates how loyal, how engaged people are with the organisation and how likely they are to stay there. So having a best friend at work, what it basically meant was Do you feel part of the team? Do you have someone that you can talk to? Is there someone you look forward to seeing at work? And it can be loads of people. But do you have at least one person that's on your side? One person that you go in and talk to? The best manager I ever had in my whole life. I feel like I should name her because she's just brilliant. She is called Christine Riley, and she was my manager when I was in when I worked for Standard Life Investments. And Christine is not only just the salt of the earth, like she's just such a brilliant, brilliant person, but she was all over this team bonding and all over the best friend at work. So I remember before I started there, the Friday before I started, she invited me in to have lunch with the team. And there was another guy starting at the same time. And we had lunch with the team and got to know everybody before I walked in there on Monday morning. And then the first Friday, she'd organised a team dinner where we were all, and that week she'd organised for each member of the team to take me for lunch one of the days. And then people more widely in the department, she'd done this rota. She just got it. She got how important it was to feel like you fitted in and to feel like that as quickly as possible. So as a manager leader, the more team bonding activities that you can do, the better. So things outside work, it can be volunteering together, like I mentioned earlier. You can have, external facilitators in to do team building workshops. You can have interest and hobby groups within your organization, even if it's small. Before Jared got his current job, he went for he got through to an assessment centre at Baillie Gifford, and they are a fabulous employer. And he came out of there. He didn't get the job in the end, but he's now working somewhere just as good. But he came out of there buzzing because he's like, Mum, they've got a rugby team and a football team, and they have people that just do gaming, and they've got people that do running, and so he's like, it's like what I was looking for at uni, but in a company, because Baillie Gifford really recognised that looking after the health and well-being of their team and helping people feel kind of engaged and bonded with each other makes business sense, as well as just being a lovely thing to do. Number 6, train managers in mental health awareness. This one is straightforward. There are certified mental health first aid courses. You've got your mental health, so your mental health first aid for managers, and you've got your kind of standard mental health. Regular workshops and seminars, again, link up with a mental health charity or a wellbeing charity. There might be some on here that would be keen to link up with other organisations. Online learning modules. The key is here to make sure if you're encouraging someone to open up vulnerably to their manager, that their manager knows what to do. They know what to say. Like if someone goes, I'm being really brave and I'm going to talk to you about my well-being and how I'm feeling at the moment, you need to be able to handle that. Like you can do all the rest of this stuff, but not know how to handle it well as a manager, and they're never going to speak to you again. Gen Z are anxious at work as a generalization, but they're so comfortable to go, I've got an anxiety disorder. Here's what I need. This is me. This is my stuff. Deal with it. This is how we're going to have to work. Their unapologetic confidence is changing workplaces for the better. You can't ignore that. You can't go, oh, well, I'm just going to go on with what I've always done. You have to listen. And from a succession planning point of view, and to kind of stop this. So a lot of the companies that Pam and I have worked with in the past have been concerned about their aging population, their aging workforce. Like, what do we do about this? How do we kind of make sure that the company survives? You need to be bringing these younger people in, and they've got a whole different approach. And so you need to adapt. The key is knowing what to say. And again, See Me Scotland and Healthy Working Lives have brilliant free resources there that you can upskill yourself and upskill your team with. 7, the final one, create a supportive work environment. Communication is absolutely key here. Communication is the biggest challenge in all organizations ever. Every single organization that Pam and I have worked in, people always say, no matter what the leadership team have done, people always say, I need more communication. You cannot over communicate, but it's particularly important with health and well-being. Making sure that you have support for personal development, making sure that you're recognizing and rewarding people, creating a culture of feedback, making sure that people know when they're doing a great job, as well as getting that kind of developmental feedback. And just be aware burnout is a characteristic of an organization, not an individual. So if you're finding that people are overwhelmed, getting to that kind of burnout stage, you need to look at what is the organization doing? Regularly asking, how can we do things better? No blame culture, just really genuinely looking for the answers to those questions. Last slide. Focusing on well-being is absolutely critical. So we've talked about increased productivity, enhanced engagement, lower absenteeism, attracting and retaining talent, innovation and creativity, and resilience to stress. You can give your workforce all of those things by focusing on well-being. However, I do absolutely know that you're going, okay, if you haven't already got a well-being strategy, you're going, well, where do we start? And I would say just start with a clear plan, like assess the needs. So speak to your team, conduct surveys, have informal discussions, like just find out what do your specific employees need. Once you've got that information, then set objectives. So you need clear, actionable goals for everything in your organization. You need them for your wellbeing program as well. And then allocate resources. So look at whether it's time or budget or both. I was reading this morning, 77% of people would consider leaving a company that doesn't focus on their well-being. 77%. It's not a choice. It's literally not a choice anymore. Marks and Spencer's, when they started to look at well-being many years ago now, decided that they were going to bring in somebody, a health and well-being like person, so not somebody that sat at a leadership level. Again, you need to be looking at where is this being driven from, and the higher up in your organization, the better. But they brought somebody in at a, just like, let's make this a little project. And they gave this person a tiny budget for health and wellbeing, and they went, can you just, it started off as a little bit of a tick box exercise. So the person that came in and got this role had this tiny budget, and they were like, I literally don't know what to do with this. Like, I'm not going to be able to get very far. But they thought outside the box, and what they decided to do was buy a massive inflatable elephant. So they got a massive inflatable elephant, and they made a sign, and they asked everybody, so they put it in the staff room, and they asked everybody to write on a post-it how they feel about their mental health and how they feel Marks and Spencer supports their mental health. So one post-it for each. It was literally the elephant in the room. People loved it because that was quite exciting, wasn't it? You go into the staff room, there's a massive inflatable elephant there. It's a talking point. It gets people. It was a brilliant use of a tiny budget. And they basically took all of those answers, and now they have a huge health and wellbeing team and resources. But we all have to start somewhere. It's about dipping your toe in the water. And if you don't know what to do, go out and buy a big inflatable elephant and stick it in the kitchen and just see and ask people to put that. So the starting point has to be ask. Don't come in and go, right, we're going to introduce this. You need to ask, what do you need? What do you need? What do you feel you're getting already from us? And what do you need? Richard Branson is really famously known for saying, people are like flowers. If you nurture them, they grow. If you ignore them, they shrink. It's your job with your health and well-being culture to nourish your team and ultimately impact the world. That's me, Pam.
Julie, that was really good. Thank you very much indeed for giving us that kind of fireside chat on having that open and honest discussion around mental health and wellbeing in the workplace. So we've got a couple of questions. We're running a wee bit short of time. A couple that have come through that I would just like you to cover rather is, how do we ensure leadership buy into implementing a wellbeing programme?
Okay, so I would say, I would say this one is, you have to be, it's depending on who the leaders are. So if you're looking at your finance manager, you need to be looking at, return of investment. So that's why I'm saying when you implement it, make sure it's measurable. Like whatever you do, make sure it's measurable and make sure you're constantly feeding back on, this is the difference we've had. So is there reduced absenteeism? Is there higher employment engagement? Are we finding recruitment easier? Has productivity gone up? What are people saying in their check-ins now that they weren't saying before? Do you know, how are people reflecting that the culture has changed? So it's about, for a leadership team, again, depending on what their take on it is, I think it's all about the measurability and not making it like a, you know, like an additional, oh, this is a nice to have and we'll do this because it's the right thing to do. It's actually integrating it and making sure it aligns with your business policy and, you know, where you actually want to head as an organization.
Yeah, and I totally agree. You know, everybody wants to be valued and appreciated at work. So looking after their health and well-being is a kind of key part of that going
Absolutely.
forward. And just one more question, which is very pertinent. How do we support remote workers in our wellbeing programme?
Yeah, so actually, See Me Scotland and Healthy Working Lives have great resources around this. It's about that inclusivity, isn't it? And making sure that part of your offer, at least, is digital platforms. You know, so looking at, you know, virtual wellness activities, looking at online mental health support, and those kind of regular virtual check-ins. So you're making sure that you're fostering inclusion regardless of location. But again, I guess it comes back to just asking, you know, asking people what would work for you, because you want this to be tailored to each individual. But it's just keeping remote workers top of mind, because, you know, they were our absolute lifeblood when we were in the pandemic for those organizations that, you know, were able to have people working remotely. So it's to make sure we're not dismissing that now, and you know, looking at how we can include that going forward in our model.
Okay, great. So apologies that we've not been able to answer all the questions. Julie's fireside chat has went on a wee bit longer than expected, but you can always hop on to our employer hub for support, or contact your local SDS member who will be able to point you in the right direction. Okay, so just want to move on to support you can access from Skills Development Scotland and our many partners. These are some of the self-help resources you may find useful. The most recent is the Employer Hub, which contains resources on managing your workforce, talent attraction, funding and training, and also recorded webinars. It also hosts our skills discovery, skills management, and skills profile digital tools, helping you to assess the skills you currently require and also the skills you need for the future. So all these resources are available free of charge. Just wanted to highlight our kind of programme, Skills for Growth. It's a fully funded service for growing businesses in Scotland. These are just some of the key benefits that Skills for Growth can deliver. And Julie mentioned some of the work we've done with businesses in Scotland through this initiative. We work with your management team to explore the skills barriers to growth and agree project outcomes. Then we'd have a diagnostic session based on the project outcomes with a range of staff doing different job roles. You then receive a bespoke people skills action plan, which would contain recommendations to address the skills gaps and any funding, training or initiatives you can tap into, as well as our many partner support as well. You'd select the key recommendations you'd like to embrace. These would be captured in an action plan, and we would continue to support you to deliver on the action plan. The digital tool that I mentioned, the skills management, it's a self-help kind of light touch skills for growth option that might be of interest. We've had many businesses, over 200 businesses in Scotland in the last couple of years have benefited from Skills for Growth and this continued support it offers. One of the most rewarding outputs for all is often improved employee engagement, which every business is trying to capture. They've been selected by the business to be involved in the process, they've shared their views and sometimes ideas, and as a result, they can become more connected with the business and the growth of resilience. We have a small team, but we cover every region in Scotland. Our contact details will be in the presentation slides you'll receive once the webinar has been uploaded. So please get in touch if you require any support. So have a think about and note down the one actionable thing you could take away from this webinar so that you can start to put it into action. The next webinar in this series is succession planning, and you can sign up through the Employer Hub. So once again, thank you for joining us for this Wellbeing at Work webinar. Hope you enjoyed the session, and thank you and have a great day.